I'm gonna share with you absolutely everything you need to know to crush anyone under 2000 elo based on 20 years of my playing experience as well as 10 years of my coaching experience. I'm playing against a very strong, almost 2100 rated player, yet this system works perfectly and it's gonna hugely increase your win rate. The first step is the opening. In the opening, you just need to prepare for the battle. To achieve that, you want to fight for the center, you want to develop all of your pieces, like this knight to f3 towards the center, controlling very important squares, and finally, you want to make sure that your king is safe. So focus on these three goals, forget everything else, and let's prepare you for success. I'm gonna play the Collie Zuckertort system. Very powerful opening, I sincerely recommend, but if you play something else, the system still works, it doesn't matter. Bishop g4. Okay, whenever your opponent makes a move, you think, what is the threat? What is his idea? Don't assume, well, he's just making a developing move, it doesn't matter. There is a concrete idea here. The pin is pretty annoyed, so I like here the move knight b to d2. Very important. I don't want you to be in the reactive mode. I don't want you to just be, oh my god, my opponent is creating some threats, I have to do something about it. Instead, you want to make a useful move for yourself. Knight d2 is a part of my plan anyway, yet it helps me to deal with the pin. Because now I can play h3, and he has to either take my knight, I'm happy to see that I'm gonna have a pair of bishops, or he has to go backwards, and then I win time. I got this move completely for free. He plays bishop h5. On top of that, I have this move g4 whenever I need that. For example, if he plays e5, I can play g4 and then grab that pawn for free. But what do I do here? I think I'm gonna go ahead with the move b3. I just want to make this Collie Zuckertort possible, where there is a bishop on b2 controlling the entire diagonal, and that makes e5 much less possible for my opponent. And that is basically the only source of counterplay he can get. Otherwise, I'm going to control the entire board and bring my plan forward. The golden principle to achieve this goal and to be really successful in the opening and in chess in general is one piece, one move. It's so important, I'm going to repeat it again. One piece, one move. Never ever make a second move with the piece that you have already developed without a very good reason. Such a reason might be if your piece is under attack. Yes, well, then you just have to. Or it's like the crucial idea of your entire opening, like knight to e5 here. If you have a good chance, you might play it before we develop all of the other pieces. But without a good reason, just don't do it. He goes f5. Wow, that's unusual. So he wants somehow to transpose into the Dutch defense. And yeah, he also wants to stop me from playing g4. I think I can still play g4 here. If my opponent plays weird, I might as well take advantage of that. So g4 he takes, I play knight to e5, remember the main goal of the opening, and that bishop is still pinned, so I'm gonna take it next move with my h-pawn. And then he has a problem with his king, he has a problem with his knight. How do you develop all of that? I like it. Of course, I could have played normally with bishop to b2 and all of that, but I always start with the most active opportunities available to me. So if I can play that, and I have calculated the lines, never ever make a move in chess without thinking what your opponent can do in response. It's such a huge problem. It's the #1 reason why you lose at chess. But I have thought about it, and now knight comes to e5. He can take it, of course, then I take it back, and I think that pawn would be annoying for him. He cannot easily deal with it. It doesn't allow you to play knight f6, your bishop is also not prepared. Your king is still in the center, and you already don't have your f-pawn. That is super scary, super dangerous. Shouldn't play like that. Now that I think about it, instead of knight e5, I also had the move knight to g5. Maybe I was too fast to make my move, because that is also very interesting. I'm threatening knight e6, I'm threatening to take the pawn on g4. Once I do that, the h7 pawn might be in trouble. Yeah, that was interesting. Like knight e5 is of course the best square for me, but unfortunately he can exchange it, and after knight g5 he cannot. Still not that simple. There was e5 afterwards, 96, and who knows what's gonna happen. In every case, this opening gives you so many interesting attacking opportunities, and you feel like you're in the driver's seat. Don't be afraid to be active, to go forward. First, it's gonna give you so many more chances and your win rate is gonna grow, but yes, you might lose some games, which is fine. You're gonna learn so much more when you play that actively, that aggressively, comparing to being passive, waiting for your opponents to play. You're not gonna learn anything that way. If you want to double your wins in no time, get a completely free cheat sheet in the description. Just click the link, download it, and you should read it every single time before you play your game. That's gonna shift your mindset. You're gonna focus on the right thing. It's a complete proven system that many of my students have used to improve their rating so much. So please grab it right now completely for free. My opponent finally takes the pawn on a5, but I can just take it back. And still the pawn on g4 will be taken. Yes, he can play queen to d7 to defend it, but bishop e2, and then I take it next move. Okay, he decides to play e6 instead. That makes sense to continue his development. And I assume his idea is after I take it with the pawn to play bishop g6. Yeah, now that I think about it, I think knight g5 would have been more active for me. It's not allowing him to exchange. I'm thinking whether I have to take right now or I can wait with it. Bishop d3 feels interesting to like stop him from playing bishop g6. But remember, always think about your opponent's opportunity first and always start with the most active moves for him. He can play queen h4 as a response, and then I cannot take back because my rook is hanging. That doesn't seem to work. Which means I think I have to take it. My rook is very active. Yes, I should be very careful with castling with such a weird pawn structure. But the most important thing for the king is to be in safety. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to castle. In most of the cases you do, but the entire purpose is to get your king, is to make it safer. If it doesn't make it safer, then don't castle. All right, I think I'm going to continue with bishop d3. That is my idea anyway. If he takes, that's gonna make my pawn structure even more solid, and I can think about going f4 and like destroying him in the center and on the king side. Once you come to the middle game, you have to shift your mindset. Like the entire goal of the opening is to prepare for you for the battle. But in the middle game, you have to think strategically. What is your plan? What is your opponent's plan? And you make all of your moves either to go ahead with your own plan or to stop your opponent's plan. Sometimes you can combine both of those things into just one move, like I can do right here, right now. Feel free to pause the video and find this move. My opponent plays queen g5. First of all, I think about his idea, his threat. He wants to grab my pawn on a5. This is like the center pawn, very important pawn. The next question I ask myself, is it dangerous for me? Yes, once he's gonna take it, he's gonna be a pawn up, he's gonna attack me. That is absolutely not something I want to see. The third question I ask, what is the most active way for me to stop that threat if it's dangerous? Can I also at the same time go ahead with my plan? Yes, I can. Remember, I just told you I can go ahead and play f4 and destroy my opponent in the center. Well, guess what? It defends that pawn. It even creates a threat. So now instead of going ahead with his plan, he has to waste more time. It's all about time in chess. So now I got that move for free. Yet he created a new threat for me. He attacks this pawn on d3. And again, what is the most active way for me to deal with it? It is a dangerous threat, but I thought I can play knight f3, but never make your move without thinking about the opponent's response. Then my g4 pawn would be exposed and he can take it. I don't like that. Which means I probably have to play queen e2 or maybe more active e4. e4 is again going forward. Definitely the most active move. The question is, can I do that? because it doesn't matter how great your move is, it can be too risky to make it. I weaken my dark squares here. He plays bishop c5 or stuff like that. If he ever takes, that's all good for me. I play knight takes e4. In fact, I'm very tempted to play it. Let's go for it. I mean, that's my philosophy. If I lose, I lose. You're gonna laugh at me, but hopefully you can also learn a lot from my game. So be as active as humanly possible. Don't get crazy, of course. Make sure that your king is safe, but it's all about the threats. Like, my king is opened here, and a lot of people would be scared of that. But the key question you should ask yourself, are there any threats my opponent can create against the king? If yes, that's a real problem. But if not, then nobody cares. He takes. That is actually surprising for me. I thought he would never allow me to have this beautiful knight in the center. This small center, d4, d5, e5, e4. The knight is perfectly placed here if it cannot be attacked, which I think is the case. Maybe he was counting on this check bishop b4, but like, my king is in the center anyway. I don't mind playing king f2 or something. Okay, he doesn't go for it. Yeah, castles is very reasonable because his rook is very active along the d file, and that is important. This knight in the center is so crazy strong that it solves that problem. The d3 pawn is not hanging twice. I can play bishop e3. That is logical. I mean, at this point, bishop b2 doesn't make any sense anymore. The bishop on e3 would still defend that pawn, attack that a7 pawn. So it feels much better. And in terms of my opponent's threats, everything is protected for now. Bishop before check, just king f2. Yeah, he goes for that. Now I realize that in the long run, that might be a problem, because once he plays rook f8, that might be pretty annoying. But he also has a problem. Like, if he plays knight to e7, I can play a3, and this bishop doesn't have a lot of good squares to go. If it has to go to a5, which is like the only square, then I have this powerful knight d6 check, which you're not happy to see. I can even start with bishop takes a7, actually, because that not only grabs a pawn, but also stop his king from going there. So in a situation where you have kings on both sides of the board, very instructive, it's all about who is the first one to create a very dangerous threat. Who is going to be the first one? He is going to destroy me over here, or I'm going to get to his king. I'm very tempted to play a3, get rid of that bishop, get the control of the d6 square. But I really don't like my pawn on f4. Maybe I'm going to play king g3. That would defend the pawn on f4, defend the pawn on g4 with my king. Yeah, unfortunately there is knight f5 check. Kind of spoils it. Okay, for now I can start with a3. You want to be the one in the driver's seat, the one creating those threats. So that seems to improve my position and push my opponent back. Again, if he just goes backwards, I get a free tempi, a free move to continue my attack, to create new problems for him. That's always great. He probably wants to play knight d5, and that is a move I'm not that happy to see. So before he does that, I want to create some problems for him. After bishop a5, I can even continue with b4 and then queen a4, trying to create problems, or maybe rook c1, b5, stuff like that. I don't really like that after... Okay, he plays knight e5 and sacrifices the bishop. I didn't expect that. I have seen it, but like, if he takes my bishop, I just play king takes. Yes, you might be scared about the king in the center, but it's all about the threats. I don't think he should have been that optimistic. I'm gonna take it. Be brave. You're not a boxer, right? Your opponent is not gonna punch you in the face. So don't be intimidated by him. Check his threats, acknowledge his ideas, but be confident in yourself, in your power. It doesn't matter how great your opponent is. Okay, he just takes the pawn here. I understand he definitely has some compensation for it, like this d3 pawn is hanging. If you want to play online but on a real chessboard, Chessnut makes it possible. I have this amazing Chessnut Evo for more than a year now, and it completely changed how I play and train chess. I have this real pieces feeling, but I play on chess.com or Lichess. I also have my books and studies here, everything in one place, no distractions. Chessnut has a variety of different boards, so you will definitely find exactly what you need, and you get a massive discount if you use the promo code journeytograndmaster on all Chessnut products. The link is in the description. But I have an extra piece! That is very important. I can even play knight d6 here with a check, that idea of mine. He can sacrifice even more stuff, but like all of that just to get that pawn and give me one check, that's not enough. Knight d3 right now is a big threat because this knight is also in trouble, and the knight would be on the same, the knight and the rook would be on the same file with my queen. That is really dangerous. That is why I like knight d6, just stopping that rook, blocking that rook, and it's again with a check, the most active move. Let's go for it. Also, this knight itself is not going to be in trouble anymore. I might even think about f5 afterwards to block that queen as well. There are some drawbacks though, that this f file is still open. My king is not really happy about that, but he has to live with that. Now, very important, he cannot go king to b8, which he would prefer, because my rook is suddenly opened, my bishop is ready to attack there, so the only square to go is c7, and then I can continue attacking with rook a7 and rook takes b7, and basically, like I said, I'm the first one to create really dangerous threats. Yes, he can give me a check, but that's one check. Nobody has died from just one check. Be super focused on attacking your opponent's king if you have a situation like that. You cannot slow down in this case. You either make a move that helps you to create more threats or stops your opponent's threats, but also try to do it in an active way. Okay, he sacrificed even more material. I think that's the right thing to do. If he plays passively, I'm gonna just destroy him. So at least he gets to give me a few checks, maybe. Okay, rook d8. He actually goes slowly about it, which is a crazy thing when you are an entire rook down, but he has his points. That rook was doing nothing. He wants to bring it into the game and he wants to attack me with more stuff. If I take on a7 with the rook, he takes rook takes d6. And then still this knight d3 is annoying. So what can I do? What can I do to stop that? Of course, the best thing for me to do would be to exchange the queens. Then I'm immediately completely winning. It's not simple though. My opponent is not stupid. Bishop c5 feels like a logical way, like I defend that pawn as well as attack the knight, but never make a move without thinking about your opponent's response. It always starts with checks and captures, checks and captures. He has knight takes d3, which is a fork, attacking both my queen and the bishop, and that is not great. So knight d3 itself doesn't feel like a huge problem. I just play king to f3, and that's all, right? No immediate. Well, once the rook is coming, knight d5 is going to be discard check to win my queen. But what I want to do is like rook to a4, attacking the knight, knight takes d3. Maybe even king e2 is possible. Queen g4 check, king takes d3. Rook takes d6, rook d4. That's all fine. I have way too much extra stuff. But otherwise, rook a4, knight d3, king to e2, the knight is hanging. Okay, you can play rook takes d6, but again, rook d4. I like it. I can also start with king to e2 immediately, but then he has an additional option of rook takes d3. I don't like that. So I'm gonna go ahead with rook to a4. In such a situation, when you have a tremendous material advantage, but your opponent is attacking you, he doesn't care, he wants to checkmate you. All you need to do is to stabilize the situation. Focus on your opponent's threats. Make sure that you have it under control. Okay, king to e2 is my idea. Yes, he actually has knight to b2 idea. Maybe it's actually more important than I thought it is. I thought it's not a big deal because I'm okay to exchange that powerful knight if I can stabilize the situation. But now I notice there is still this g4 pawn hanging with the check. From that perspective, maybe I should have played king f3. That would be more solid. That guy would be protected. And after knight b2, I would be able to play queen to b1. Okay, everybody makes mistakes. My system is not about making all of the perfect moves. You can never, ever do that. It's about making those solid, active moves, creating problems for your opponent, and trying your best to limit your blunders and mistakes. I notice another idea. No, that's not the problem. Rook d6, rook d4. I thought knight takes e4, but I can still take it with the bishop and my queen defense. So I think that knight b2 is my opponent's best chance. It's still good for me that I protect that pawn. He's not going to be able to win it in that case. And I'm going to have an extra bishop. But at least he gets, you know, a few checks here and there. Yeah, he goes for it. That's correct. I like the move queen d4. My queen is going to be in the center. It's going to control as many squares as possible. And the d6 pawn is still protected. So let me do that. He can play queen takes g4, but I plan just king to f2. And then hopefully he doesn't have any checks. Checks, very important. Make sure your opponent doesn't have any checks, and then you're more or less in safety. And afterwards, yeah, once I stabilize, I can take on a7, I can play rook h7, rook g7. I even can get to his king. Oh, there is another check. He has queen c2 check. That I missed, to be honest. But then he doesn't grab that pawn, yes. And I would just play king f3, and the king is safe. Here, I have this move king f2. Very important. If you play king d2, you blunder queen to g2 check, and your rook is lost. But this way, his knight is under attack, so basically he should take. And then, hopefully, everything is stabilized. But my opponent has a lot of pawns all of a sudden. I still think it's not enough to compensate because my position is so much more active. But yeah, at some point you start to calculate those pawns as well. It doesn't matter though before we reach the endgame. With the queens on the board, it's all about the checkmate, whether he's gonna deliver it or I'm gonna stabilize it and thanks to an extra bishop, give him a checkmate myself. Once we exchange the queens, that would be another story. Then pawns might be important. I do like my position now. Like, I don't see a single threat he can create against me. Everything is under control. And then, yeah, I'm ready to create those problems. Maybe he wants to play like h6 or h5 just to stop rook h7 for now. Queen takes a7 is not that powerful because it blunders the pawn on d6, which in turn makes this rook not active. It's now very passive on d8. So after h6, I have to think how I can proceed. I can play queen e5. The queen is very solid there and opens up the bishop. Maybe bishop a7 would be an idea. He plays b6 instead. Okay, that defends that pawn. Maybe he thought that is more important. But what about the pawn on h7? I think I can just grab it. I still see no checks. So, well, that's a nice bonus that it's a free pawn. But mostly it's for me about activating that rook. That rook on h1 was doing absolutely nothing. Now, on the 7th rank, it's going to be a monster, creating huge headache for my opponent. At some point, I also want to play a5. That creates more pressure against the king. It's all about the checkmate, remember. Kings on the opposite sides of the board, queens on the board, it's all about the checkmate. So now rook g7 is a threat. c5. Well, queen c7 is also interesting. Queen c7, sorry. Queen to g7. Threatening queen c7, and of course attacking the queen. He doesn't have any checks. But that allows him to get into the endgame, where he will get the d6 pawn, but I will get the a7 pawn, and my pieces are very active. I'm just one pawn down for the bishop. I should be a little careful not to exchange all of the pawns. It would be a theoretical draw, even though still with a very good chance to win. But my king is out of danger, because even if I play rook g7, he has this queen h4 check, and, you know, it's still a little bit annoying. The alternative is also queen to e4, as his king is in big trouble there. But it's a little bit risky for my king as well. I think I'm gonna go ahead with queen to g7. So one of the most important principles that you can also find in the cheat sheet available for free, the link is in the description, grab it to double your wins. Then you have extra material, just exchange everything that moves until it doesn't move anymore. If you have 10 pieces against 9, you only have 10% more pieces. But if you exchange a bunch and you have 2 against 1, you have twice as many pieces. Okay, now we are getting into the endgame. And in the endgame, there are 3 things that really matter. The king's activity. Suddenly in the endgame, from the piece that you are most worried about, the king becomes a warrior that you absolutely must use. You must make it as active as possible. A lot of players under 2000 completely forget about it and lose their game because of that. Secondly, the pieces activity. How active are all of your pieces? And thirdly, okay, he actually plays that. That is interesting. Trying to save that pawn and take my pawn afterwards. And third, the passers. Do you have passers? Can you create it and can you push it forward? And you consider those things both for you and for your opponent. I actually like his move. I underestimated it because now he's about to grab that pawn without giving me his a pawn. That wasn't part of my plan. You're too smart, my opponent. Okay, but I can use that time to go forward with my king. Remember the king's activity, number 1. So I use this momentum to bring my king because he cannot do that. His king is stuck. All right. And very important, the passers. He does have 1 passer, but it's easy for me to stop. Everything else is not moving for him. I'm about to play king e5 and grab that pawn and create a passer. Once I create a passer of my own, that would be really horrible news. He does have a move rook to d7 that I have to think about. Because if I take, he has 2 pawns for the bishop. Should be still winning for me though, right? My king is super active. He has to stay there to defend that pawn. And that means sooner or later he's not gonna get any moves and I'm gonna be able to go ahead and take all of his pawns. Yeah, probably he realizes that, and I think his idea is to play rook e1. By the way, the rook behind the pawns is always very strong. So that is a nice strategy. Also, maybe he wants to attack that pawn over there. But like I said, it's all about the passers. So I want to play rook to e7 and take the pawn on e6. Even at the cost of that pawn, I don't care that much. I think my pawn, even though it's only 1 against 3 passers, it's going to be faster. You know, when you have 3 pawns, you need so much time to push it forward. But if you have just 1, that just goes straight forward. And that is exactly my goal here. Also, his rook is now in a very awkward place. He has to spend some time to bring it back. Not to mention the difference in terms of the king's activity. Like his king is tremendously passive. It's going to be a problem for him. My pawn is going to come with a check, whereas my king is super active in the center. The best king you can imagine. Okay, let's push our pawn. Once you create a passer, your main goal is to push it forward as fast as possible. Just make sure you don't blunder it. I think at this point, if I push it fast enough, I don't even care about exchanging the rooks. I'm going to be the first one to promote the queen, and then the number of pawns he has doesn't matter. And I don't really see a good way for him to stop. Like you can play rook h4 and then rook h8, but then your rook would be so passive. This is really not a good strategy. Otherwise, how do you stop it? If you bring it here, yes, what he's doing, and rook f1, I'm gonna just block it with my bishop. So I'll just play f6. If he plays rook e1, I can probably not play f7. I can still promote the queen, but then I'm going to lose all of my pieces, and I'm going to have a queen against the rook and 3 pawns. That's exactly what happens. So I think instead I just play king to f5. 1 move, defending everything, and then I don't see how he stops f7. Because after rook f1, I have bishop f4. And as a side note, just as a bonus, I have created a trap for him. Now bishop f4 is threatening to win the rook. But I don't want you to play for those tricks. I want you to make actually useful moves like this one. And as a side bonus, yes, it's nice to have it. Yeah, so he plays that. I think I just go f7 anyway. Cannot take anything, rook f1, just bishop f4. He can take it and then take my rook, but I have an extra queen, so I go for it. Check your opponent's opportunities. Doesn't matter how great you think your position is, your move is, it's never too late to spoil your game. But I did that, now I'm confident, that's winning for me, so I'm not scared of my opponent, I still go ahead with my plan. And notice, yes, he has a lot of pawns here, but did it help him? No, not at all. In the endgame, it's not about the quantity of the pawns, it's about the quality, the passers, and how fast you can push it forward. That is what matters. My opponent resigns, there is nothing he can do. In this video, you can learn about the most important mistake that stops your chess growth. Don't forget to grab completely free cheat sheet to double your chess wins. The link is in the description.